did want to react to this, man, and kind of get your thoughts on this one as well, man. So like I said, man, definitely hit that like button on the front end. Don't forget to subscribe either if you're new to the channel. Man, this article released probably over about a week ago, man. Maurice Jones-Drew. We obviously know who Maurice Jones-Drew is, man. Former NFL big dog running back, man. Played a long time, man. Obviously, he's doing his thing on NFL Network. You always catch him out there on the late night. Well, I guess if you're in Cali, it's not too late, but in terms of us East Coast folk, I'd be like, bro, it's dang near 1 in the morning, man. I'm tired of watching you, Maurice Jones-Drew, MJD, man. You cool, but it's late, bro. All right. But what he did do was rank all of the running backs that played last season, and specifically the ones that started games. All right. He had a little criteria on this thing, man. So he said basically any running back that started at least one game last year, but also had at least 20 carries this past season. And he also did a little bit of a breakdown, a little bit of an analysis. Anybody that started more than one game, he even gave you a little write-up on. But he ranked all the running backs, like I said, man, that started at least one game this season and had 20 carries this final season. And with that, man, it was pretty interesting because obviously, you know, we have a couple running backs that played this year, but only one guy actually made this list, which I was a little bit surprised by. But when you think about the criteria, I was like, okay, I see how Jaylen Warren, unfortunately, was not included. All right. But of the 174, Jesus, of the 74 running backs that started at least one game this season and had at least 20 carries this season, we did have our one guy, our starter, Mr. Najee Harris, make the list of running backs. And this is, like I said, Maurice Jones-Drew, his list. And the reason why I wanted to bring this one up and why I appreciate or at least respect his list a lot more than some of the other lists that you see out there by the analysts is this, man. MJD played the game, played it at a high level, played it for a long time. I'm one of those guys that, I also played the game, played it for a long time. And when I'm around those type of dudes, man, that have done it, that, look at it a certain way, see it a certain way, but are also still actively a part of it, which he is, being a part of the NFL Network. He's out there at those training camps. He's at those practices. He's seeing it. I do put a little bit more stock in his opinion of these players, man, because this is a guy that isn't just watching a highlight one or two. He's like, yo, this dude's out there. He travels around. He has to see these dudes' eyes on him. So I do like that. But on the list, he had my man Najee ranked as the 18th best running back that started at least one game and had 20 carries last season. All right. So I'll read his write-up on Najee, and I'll tell you some of the players that he had in front of him and obviously who was around him as well. Actually, let me read off the players that was around him first, and now I'll give you the full read up on Najee. All right. So like I said, Najee had him ranked at 18th in the from all those eligible running backs, right, that started at least one game last year and had at least 20 plus carries last season. At 17, though, he had Tony Pollard, obviously the running back with the Tennessee Titans, man, played in 16 games this year, had 1,079 rushing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, 230 receiving yards as well. He had J.K. Dobbins at 16, Chuba Hubbard at 15, James Conner, shout out to James Conner at 14, Devon Achane at 13 on the list. Alvin Kamara was 12th on his list. Bucky Irvin, running back down there in Tampa Bay, was the 11th best running back to MJD in terms of those guys that had at least one start and 20 plus carries minimum this past season. His 10th best running back was Aaron Jones, Minnesota Vikings. Then at number 9, he had Joe Mixon with the Houston Texans. At number 8, James Cook, Buffalo Bills. Whoa, hey, no, whoa, hey, I ain't say that was him. Don't you get me in trouble. All right. At number 7, Kyron Williams, running back with the Rams. Number 6, he had Jonathan Taylor, running back with the Indianapolis Colts. Number 5, Josh Jacobs. Shout out to Josh Jacobs, man. He had a 1,300 this year, 15 rushing touchdowns, 1 receiving touchdown as well. He balled out. Bijan Robinson is his 4th best running back. I did not know Bijan had 1,400 on the ground this year either. Shout out to Bijan. 1,400 on the ground, 14 receiving touchdown or 14 rushing touchdowns, another 431 through the air with the receiving touchdown there. Yeah, I like it. Jahmyr Gibbs. All right, shout out to Jahmyr Gibbs, another 1,400-yard back, 500 through the air, 16 rushing touchdowns, 4 receiving touchdowns. Holy smokes, he was cooking. Then obviously at number 2, he had Derrick Henry. Shout out Derrick Henry, man. 1,900 on the ground, 16 rushing touchdowns. Then he had another 2 receiving touchdowns. And then we all know who the number 1 rated running back was on his list. It was Saquon Barkley. No surprise there. 2K on the ground, 13 rushing touchdowns, another 2 receiving through the air. All right. So in terms of the backs that he has in front of Najee, not a lot that I hate. I felt like, obviously if I was going to hate Devin Achane, excuse me, that would be one of those ones that I would probably be like, hey, bro, I ain't really feeling that one being ahead of Najee. I would also throw Chuba Hubbard, even though I know Chuba was a little bit more productive down there in that abysmal Panther system. Just like I still like my man Najee over him. J.K. Dobbins, I feel like Najee outperformed him, period. That's just how I look at it. And then obviously with Tony Pollard was a productive player this year. So I was like, you know what? I ain't tripping on that one, man. But the other 2, yeah, I did have an issue with. All right. But in terms of what MJD had to say about my man Najee, let me get that. Man. Don't you jump on me like that? There it is. Now we back. All right. So he says, when you really look at the stat sheet, Harris's 2004 campaign wasn't all that eye-opening. He had 75 or fewer rushing yards in 15 games, including playoffs. That said, he eclipsed 1,000 yards for the 4th straight season. So he generally made the most of his time in Pittsburgh. He hits free agency in March, and there is a real possibility we haven't seen him reach his full potential. So like I said, man, that's what Maurice Jones-Drew had to say about Najee based off of this past season and, how he kind of stacks up versus some of these other guys. So like I said, those are the guys that he has in front of him. But some of the guys that Najee is, that he had ranked ahead of, which was kind of good to see as well. Rico Dowdle. Obviously, we know he was with the Dallas Cowboys last year, 1,000-yard rush. And the thing that I do like about MJD, he didn't just do this list solely based on stats. He's doing this based off of his personal feel, what he sees. And ultimately, it's like, man, if he thinks that this guy was better, even though his numbers might not be as good as this guy, he still went ahead and ranked him ahead, which even though I didn't agree with the guy that he had ranked ahead of Najee, I do like that thought process. All right. David Montgomery, obviously know, he played the 14 games this year, man, did come back for the playoffs. But yeah, that was a guy that he had Najee ranked ahead of David Montgomery. I know there are some people out there that prefer Montgomery. They like his explosiveness a little bit more. All right. DeAndre Swift, Najee was ahead of him. Najee was ahead of Breece Hall. Najee was ahead of Chase Brown as well, obviously with the Cincinnati Bengals. So I do like that. The other one that I'm ready to down this hill. Ramondre Stevenson. Oh, man, of course. Najee ranked 18th. Mr. Ramondre Stevenson, 10 mil per year. I'm looking at it, I'm like, yo, Najee, you better get more than that. All right. He had him ranked 26 on the list. All right. We know he had 800 rushing yards this season, played in 15 games, 7 rushing touchdowns, 1 receiving touchdown as well. I hate to say it, man. I'm going to down that hill, though, man. All right. Najee, you got to get more than Ramondre, man. You got to get more than Ramondre. All right. But he also had Najee ranked better than Kareem Hunt, better than Rashad White, better than Brian Robinson as well, man, which I was happy to see that. But I like Brian Robinson. All right. I like him a lot. Tank Bigsby as well. Kenneth Walker. I mean, there's some names up here, man. But I do feel like, man, as we're talking about Najee, he is one of those guys that the explosive part, it continues to hurt him. It continues to haunt him. There are offenses, though, that I do think he could flourish in. I forgot who we were talking to, man, or how it came about. But the concept of if Najee was in Kansas City with Mahomes, or if Najee was out there in LA with the Chargers, I'm like, yeah, Najee could fit in both of those offenses, and Najee would, I think, have a lot more production in both of those offenses, man, especially when you look at just the different, O-line combinations he's had to run behind. You also look at the different, obviously passing attacks that he's played under different coordinators and stuff like that, or just the lack of explosiveness. He's faced a lot more, bodies in the box. Whereas you look at how teams play the Chiefs, man, they're not filling the box like that. So a dude like Najee, yeah, he could take full advantage of a situation like that, man. Obviously, we know a dude like Najee with the Chargers, man. If you're talking about with a Justin Herbert type quarterback, yeah, that does open up more opportunities for him just because you're not getting that stacked box. And I do think that's something that could help him out. But at the same time, I'm Team Najee, man. I've been on that, man. But at the same time, I'm only Team Najee for the right price. Because, yeah, what sucks for Najee is when I look at Travion Henderson, when I look at Caleb Johnson, when I look at, some of these backs coming out, I'm like, yo, there are multiple ways that I think we can do this thing. I know some people have been talking about Nick Chubb. Might get to that one. All right. Yeah. That name's been popping up recently. But I'm like, yo, there are a lot of options out here. Different variations, man. The free agency part of it, we brought up Aaron Jones. We brought up J.K. Dobbins. But there are definitely some young dudes, man. There are definitely some young cats. I hear you, Jay Farrell. Made me feel like I was in church. I say, hey, talk about it now. Talk about it. All right, come on now. But look, man, when I'm looking at, these different backs, man, I'm looking at specifically some of these college guys as well. I do feel like, yeah, a combination of an Marion Hampton, the kid out of UNC, a combination of a Dylan Sampson, right? I do think those are the type of guys that if you're pairing them with a Jaylen Warren and maybe even that third tier free agent guy, right? I do think that could be very productive. And even though it's not the standalone that Najee is, I think you could equate to that production or maybe even surpass it, even though it would look and feel slightly different. When we talk about Nick Chubb,